Cool. All right. Tweeted that out. Let's get at it. All right. So welcome to what is going to be known as Wine Wednesday, Wine NFT Wednesday. It's going to be every Wednesday where we bring out a wine, a guest. Unfortunately, this week's guest doesn't drink wine, but that's fine because the fun of it is, just exploring, chatting, find out what's going on new with our guests, what's happening in the space, trying some wine, which I enjoyed this week. We're trying an A to Z 2020 Riesling from Oregon. And somebody actually last week that I met on Twitter who was doing a wine NFT asked me when the last time I had an Oregon wine was, and I couldn't remember. So I, out of guilt, got this wine. Videogamefreak, obviously you need to introduce yourself. A lot of people know who you are, but what you're into, what you're getting involved with. You're getting bigger and bigger in the space, and it's exciting.
Yeah, no, it's been a wild journey so far, and thank you for having me. I'm CJ, VGF, Videogamefreak. I am sort of an operator and advisor on NFT projects, some of which some of you guys may be familiar with. And yeah, I'm indulging in some green tea at the moment, and I mean I spent years in the hospitality industry, so I'm very well versed in the wines, and so I can talk wine forever. But I just choose not to drink anymore. So
Fair enough.
It's helping myself in other ways. No, I appreciate you having me on. It's been a fan, and I've followed and talked with you on the back channels. So happy to come and support you on here as well.
Yeah, of course. Well, I know I've had a lot going on, and just before we went live officially, you were telling me you had a pretty crazy week, and I think everybody's had a crazy week.
What do you mean? NFTs are dead.
Yeah. So we had some of the biggest sales actually within the last 7 days, and I don't think people realize that it's not like, oh, it's this project had a big sale. Like, it's across the board. We're seeing the biggest sales, and they're increasing over what we imagined was possible. So we have like the Alien, Bored Ape Yacht Club. Actually, you have a little bit of information on the Alien and the purchase and why it's connected.
Yeah, so I found out not too long ago, and I think this was news to Tyler, NFT Anonymous, the seller of the Trippy Ape that went for 55 Ethereum, that apparently Silly Tuna, the seller of the COVID Alien, was the buyer of that ape. And so I don't even think he had known that up until maybe an hour ago. And so we're still kind of, going about trying to confirm that. But I mean, the address is public, so I'm sure, it was kind of news to us, and it was like, what do you mean?
it's we didn't expect to see somebody get $10 million and then turn around and say, okay, I'm going to go buy the next best, what I think is going to be the next Alien. And if that's not a confirmation of, Bored Ape Yacht Club sticking around for the long run and being considered, one of the top 5 projects that we're going to see in the crypto space or in the NFT space, I don't know what is. It's like watching like a Shark Tank episode where, they know how to pick winners, and, and they invest. You're like, all right, I'm going to see that in Bed Bath & Beyond in 3 months.
Yeah. Well, and to watch a $10 million CryptoPunk sale, then be leveraged directly following that into $100,000+ Bored Ape sale or acquisition. That's
what do you think the next big purchase is? Like, because we saw the Punk sale, we saw the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Do you think we see more apes be sold for like high numbers?
Oh yeah.
Or do you think?
No, I think that's just the beginning. So like we were looking into some of the numbers this morning, and the floors on some of the rarer apes has like gone through the roof. Like zombies, I think doubled after that sale. Like the floor on the like Cheetah Gang, DMT, the robots, like all of those, basically like the floors got swept on them. So it's I think this is kind of just the beginning as far as maybe not breaking the record, because I think previously Tyler's Trippy Ape had that sweet spot of being both a rare ape and a phenomenally as far as aesthetics go, in my opinion, one of the better.
Cleanness is a very underrated. It's not like a property where you can be like, oh, 24% of apes are clean. It's one of those things where you actually need to like, okay, this ape has cool things, it's clean, and you can brand it. It's great. It makes it great. You can write a story around it, and that's actually what I was getting at when I was talking to Tenacious when he traded his Punks comic 175 for the ape, and he was like, well, it's kind of boring. And I was like, no, you're thinking about this all wrong. It's perfect because it's a clean slate. It's not like it's a zombie with bunny ears and has an earring and has a weird, like, it works, and you can you don't have to feel like it's being misplaced somewhere.
Well, and not only that, but it ties together, right? Like it having the Punks comic low mint edition then be leveraged into a trade for a Bored Ape with Punks #2 be featuring the Bored Apes. Like it's almost too perfect a narrative, right? And I think that's a great trade in both directions, because I did a little research on that, and the person that made that trade on the other end got in at a good entry point, and I think that they're both happy with that trade, so it's a win-win-win.
Right. Now it's been exciting. NFTs are certainly dead. They're not coming back, and it's not a technology that's going to stick around. I think we can all agree on it at this point.
No, it's just kind of been driven into the ground. The bubble popped. None of us know what we're talking about.
So I got to ask you now, because we talked about like what's happening out there. What has been happening with you? Have you minted anything this week? Any purchases?
I have not minted anything personally, but I have made some acquisitions. So we had so I was literally just making purchases on Hen like right before we got on this call. So like
I have yet to purchase anything on Hen, and I feel like I'm an outsider now just because I haven't made the leap yet.
Well, so a little bit of like background on me. I'm a forever a critic, but an eternal optimist. So for Tezos, I really like the low gas fees, the onboarding, and like especially for Hicket Nook in particular, it has a really interesting layer of discovery, but the UI UX could definitely use a little bit of work. Like the search is practically non-existent. You can't really browse to find anything that you want to look for, sort of being linked to it from a Twitter or Discord or something along those lines. So the artists do have to do a lot of self-promotion to get it out there.
Right.
So a great opportunity for a collector, right? Like if you have that sort of alpha, or you follow certain artists, or you see an early drop and it catches your eye, that's a huge advantage, because if you a collector get early or like first mover on a new piece or a new artwork, that's something that could have a lot of arbitrage opportunity fairly quickly, especially with Tezos being I think they're already featured on a couple of these gallery type sites, and there's some virtual galleries that are going to be featuring Tezos works. And then I believe Tezos artworks will be available on OpenSea before too long, which that'll be huge.
So okay, that was going to be my next question, is because it's almost a different. It is a different world from what the traditional NFT buyer is used to, which is OpenSea, um, and everything is Ethereum based. Are we seeing people make the jump? Obviously, there are people probably making the jump from traditional OpenSea going to Hen. But I would imagine we have a lot of people that started on Hen and said, "All right, this is where I'm gonna, cultivate my following and my art." And now they're probably about to be brought into the limelight. Now, people for the first time are going to see them. Where there's people like you and I'm sure Artchick and these other people who've been buying on Hen. They're like, "Yeah, I've known about this person for 2 months. Like, where have you been?" Like, and I have all of their pieces, and they're 10% of what market value is now. So I bought them for 10% of what market value is now. So I'm up.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a really interesting sort of mechanic or social there, because so Hickenook and Tezos definitely kind of had its time and its place. It's serving a purpose, especially with second and third world artists, because the gas fees are so low. The barrier of entry is practically non-existent. You can't just go and mint a $20 or $30 piece of artwork on the Ethereum blockchain when gas fees alone would price you out of being able to sell that. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So a lot of these artists that minting on the Ethereum network was prohibitively expensive were then allowed the opportunity to still make and monetize their artwork. And when I think that we will see that little bit of a shift when you have the attention and the eyes, whether it be through something like incorporation with OpenSea or something along those lines, where the broader NFT market can view these without having to go to a rather niche site. It's kind of weird to say niche, but Hickenook has kind of generated almost this cult following between like Twitter and stuff like that. Like, they have their own whales, their own collectors.
Right.
Like there was like I forget what it was, like 4,000 Tezos sale the other day, which I believe.
I guess for the people that don't know what that converts to in ETH or dollar value, that's
like $12,000 or something like that. Like, that's pretty significant.
And it's the normal person be like, well, what? There's like 8 to 20 ETH sales on OpenSea every day, but in that kind of circle, the vibe is not, you don't see these large sales. It's less about, oh, look how much money I made. It's more like, all right, here's a piece of art. It's pretty affordable. It's really cool. You can buy it.
Well, and on Hickenook, there's a different methodology, I think. Like, a lot of these artworks are almost mind-blowingly inexpensive. Like, there are some phenomenal pieces of art available for a few Tezos,
right?
Which is like, maybe $5, $10, $30 even. And this is artwork where, if it were minted on a different platform, could very realistically sell for many multiples of that.
Right.
The trade-off being that a lot of these artists are leveraging bonding curves and, higher edition counts to make up for that.
Right.
Where they're able to make that, that as more editions sell, the price in Tezos goes up.
Right.
I'm not a huge, proponent for bonding curves or anything like that, but there have been a lot of artists that have seen a lot of success on Hickenook using that method. And it, with the collector base and a lot of attention going towards that platform, I think that it'll be a really, really interesting kind of space to watch when the broader NFT market has this sort of attention and accessibility, kind of the spotlight put on it.
Right.
And I think that some of these artists like John, I don't know if I'm like, there's like John with like 8 J's, and he does, the Squares project, the Windows project.
Yeah, the Windows. I've seen the Windows project pop up a lot the last week.
So he's had some pretty high-priced sales on the network and stuff like that. I think he's definitely kind of a mover in that space. And he's played around with like a lot of different price points, a lot of different edition counts.
Right.
So I think a lot of people look to him as sort of almost a methodology to follow, where you can be successful in the space, even without charging thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for a piece of work.
Right.
And I don't think that'll work for every artist or every type of NFT project, but for a traditional artist looking to get into the space without having to pay prohibitively high gas fees to mint their first work,
right,
I think it kind of lays out that blueprint of what the platform's capable of.
Right.
And I don't know, for me it's just really interesting to watch. And so I had gone and kind of started collecting back when they ran that it was like a call it event where they were encouraging a lot of artists to list their artworks for either free, just the price of gas, or very low barrier event to drive collection. And so I like made a Temple wallet, threw a couple Tez in there, and just started going crazy for a minute.
Right.
And now that it's sort of gained some traction, and I think it'll have some legs, especially when it if it does have some of these connections and interoperability between, like, I'm looking at it like, if I can show my Tezos collections and my Hickenook collected artworks next to my Ethereum based art, I don't really care where I bought it,
Right.
I just want to be able to show it.
Right.
If I can go on the same sort of gallery and show all
I know
of my
On Cyber is getting close. I think they can do Tezos, and I don't know, and Ethereum. I don't know what else they can do though.
Mm-hmm. I'm really excited for that, because I as a collector, I don't really care where my where I collected it or what blockchain it's even featured on. Some collectors are sticklers. Yeah, there's some out there that
we do have people that are like, if it's not ERC, they're
ERC 721, it's not worth collecting.
The technical side of it, which is important, obviously. Like, this is all happening because it's a very technical revolution. It's giving us opportunity, but at some point, if it's art and it's just a piece of art and there's no functionality to it, you can't go too far and say, oh, well, it's worthless now. But there's certainly people who are going to disagree with that statement.
But I think it's a different line of thinking, right? There may be those people that are looking at the NFTs and kind of coming from a fine art world,
right?
And that, in that sense, I can definitely see the argument being made for ERC 721s, and like that provenance, et cetera, having and commanding a premium. But from my perspective, like, if I'm just collecting a work to literally collect it and hold it, not to like try and make a flip or a sale, or for an investment, I don't really care what it is.
Right.
I want to support the artist, and I want to collect what I like.
Right.
So, when I'm breaking down NFT projects that I'm investing in or looking to make an arbitrage play, or investing in fundamentals and reading white papers and whatever, that's an entirely different conversation, than, at least in my mind.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you on that 100%.
Yeah, then when I'm browsing Hickenook and I just see something that I like, and I'm like, oh, snipe.
Right, exactly. Oh, so speaking of snipes, I'm curious on your take, and I'll just, in disclosure, you're involved with Punk's comic, and I hold a high majority. I'm a top 100 holder.
10,000, number 10,000, baby.
Yeah, and I hold number 10,000. the floor for Punk's comic, we've talked about Bored Apes floor, Punk's floor a little bit. The Punk's comic floor right now is like 0.335. So it's up like a little over 50% from mint price. I have a feeling that we see that hold right now. I don't think it's gonna dip, and if it does dip, anything under 0.3 is gonna get snap bought. I think we really do see the floor for a non-special numbered mint go for close to 1 ETH within the next 45 days. I tweeted about this earlier, and I was walking back from the grocery store, and I was thinking, like, there's so many people that found out about that because of the hype, and it was all over Twitter for one day. We saw A16Z post some stuff about it. I had people that are not in the NFT space; they're investors and non-traditional asset investors, and they reached out to me, and I'm thinking, well, there's so many people that are looking at this, and they're like, well, if it's going to be the next Disney or the next Marvel, and if it's one of these different projects in the space, and you look at what's for sale right now, I think there's like 300 comics total for sale, and I'm sure there are people sitting on stuff saying, "Oh, I'm not going to sell it until it's higher. I'm not going to waste listing it." I think it takes one more announcement, and it doesn't have to be a crazy one. I don't think it has to be a crazy one. It could just be who the merch partner is.
That's a crazy one.
And
knock on.
Yeah, I think that's when people realize, okay, I missed out, but now it's time to like FOMO part 2, and you just see secondary fly up, and now all the people who traded apes for comics or sold for less than 1 Ethereum are going to be like, shit, like I let something that's worth way more than that go for so little.
Well, I think there's a couple angles to look at it, right? Like,
real quick, do you know? Okay, so has anybody done the math on what a single comic, if it's, and I know that like there's levels to it, but if the low, middle, and high end for staking, low, middle, high end for burning, like what does that actual Ethereum value of that look like on a 1-year basis?
So, Beanie's had his estimations done for the fair market value for both the CryptoPunks and what's included in the Pixel Vault. When you take into the fractionalization and like the percentages, like 50% going to the stakeholder or the people that stake, 25% going to the DAO, plus the rest of the assets, the Lost Robbie, the 1 of 1 Hackatao, 1 of 1 Robbie Trevino, 1 of 1 Killer Acid, and as of a couple days ago, the announcement of the 1 of 1 Fuckrender.
Right.
The Pixel Vault will continue to grow, right?
We're not expecting him to acquisitions and deals and partnerships to stop. It's only going to continue and get more aggressive from here out.
Yeah. And so the part that was really fascinating to me is it took like it's not a new project. It's not like this sold out, instantly.
Right.
The project's been live for 3 weeks.
Right.
It took 3 weeks to sell 8,000 comics, and it took an hour
to sell
the last 2,000. So I mean, once they started to move and Beanie started making a few of these announcements, I almost laughed because like when the Fuckrender announcement was made, it was almost made like from my perspective of like, well, crap, we need to announce this like before it sells out.
Right.
And but it was really interesting to watch how quickly that FOMO accelerated. And somebody the other day, I wish I had it on hand so I could give them a shout out. They did the math on it, and they figured between the amount of comics that the team had bought for themselves with Beanie kind of publicly,
I see that tweet.
Yeah, where Beanie had kind of has publicly disclosed that a majority of his tokens will be burned for the DAO tokens. And then, the wallet breakdowns of most collectors having, 2 to 3 comics.
Right.
We're looking at, kind of 60-40-ish, 70-30-ish kind of ratio of burning to staking.
Right.
And when you figure that most collectors are going to want to stake one, burn one, being in that 2 to 3 NFT collector range,
right,
that only leaves about like 3,000 editions available for possible resale.
right.
So when you look at like less than a third of them are available, on the secondary, or even possible to be, on the secondary, then it comes down to, okay, once those sell through, or a majority of those sell through, how many are like, what would it cost to buy you out of your share? And I think that's a really interesting conversation of like, how much does it cost for you to give up your only staked edition, or your own, like, because again, once you stake it or you burn it, like that, you're either getting a DAO token in return, or it's staked into the smart contract and you have to literally stake it to sell it. So that's where I think we start to see some really like almost quote unquote crazy sales go. Or like if Tropical Farmers, 69 mint edition, it sells for 6.9 Ethereum, that would just like complete the meme circle,
And I do think that, and I did some like back of the napkin math. If you value the company, or at least like the Punks token hold 100% of Punks at $1 value right now, you're in like a middle of the road scenario. Each comic could be worth half an ETH to 2 ETH, depending on what the price action dictates. And again, that's back of the napkin math. Don't hold me to it. Not financial advice. But I think anything under 0.5 right now, in my opinion, is I'm just looking for things to snag, upping my position a little bit more. Yeah, I know I had a couple weeks, but there's risk to also consider in that. And I made my initial 6 purchases and added another 2, and then another 2, and then another 1. And then, of course, I had that last one I just had to do before I went to bed, and
you landed it.
It's one of those things where you slowly are seeing the opportunity, and I will say I do also kind of like shadow trade DC Investor. I don't mean like I actually like copy his trades, but if he posts something or he says he's purchasing something publicly, it takes a lot for him to endorse something. The only things I have seen him endorse are like ringers, glyphs, punks, Ethereum.
Man doesn't miss.
Like he doesn't miss, but he also is very, very, very strategic in, I'm not going to say I endorse Titan.
No, he's a very conservative, at least in my sort of definition, very conservative.
He's a consultant. You can tell it from the bone that he was raised in the consultant corporate world, and that's how he still operates. He didn't get out of it and say, all right, I'm going to go wild and free and full degen. He operates like a surgeon with a scalpel knife, but in the financial industry.
Well, and you touched on the sort of ballpark potential Ethereum value of the comics. I think it's really interesting because I had a couple people when I first started talking about the project, like, okay, say theoretically the project, doesn't have any legs, that the project flops, that it goes nowhere, that the founders ghost, which I mean they're all other than Beanie being Anon, the other founders are well known and CryptoPunks themselves. So I thought it was rather interesting to kind of conceptualize, okay, what if it does flop, right? In that case, worst case, the underlying assets could still be sold at fair market value. So you have, the underlying CryptoPunks and the the Lost Robbie and the One of Ones, which granted, even if the project flopped, like the One of Ones may not have as high of a market value because they're tied to the comic,
right?
But the CryptoPunks themselves are worth somewhere in the ballpark of like, I don't know, let's say like 400 to 600 ETH.
Right.
And like that's nothing to shake a stick at.
Right. No, there is definitely a to a degree it's a liquid, but there is liquidity within the project for even if it crashes and burns, there is way to get ETH out of it still.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, massive kudos to Beanie because a lot of the conceptualization of applying some of these kind of DeFi mechanics to NFTs, came from him. And, even with like the merchandise sales going directly towards providing liquidity for the Punks tokens on, Uniswap and stuff like that. That is really, really clever because that way those that are looking for that off ramp of like, hey, this is my exit plan. This is my, opportunity. I'm going to cash out.
Right.
There's liquidity provided to those people that want to do that. And then those reacquired tokens are then redivested to those that continue to stake.
Yep.
So it's rewarding those that continue to have confidence in the project.
Right.
And, with the announcement of the Meta Hero project, they've brought.
We didn't even touch on that. It's just like, and the back of the napkin math was when I was just looking at like comic sales and what is the underlying value and what happens when NFT art appreciates even more than what we have in like Genesis pieces in 15 years are, what is a Lost Robbie worth once every traditional art buyer knows what it is. Tomorrow I'm going to a chat in Sao Paulo with the Institute of Sao Paulo for NFTs, and the woman who invited me is a traditional art collector, and she has no idea what NFTs are. She thinks I've brought them up to her obviously, but there are people out there who own art in a serious way, and I mean serious way. And when we think like we're being crazy and buying squiggles for 1 ETH when it's 4K, there are people who drop big money on art, and they're passionate about it. What happens when a Lost Robbie has that story and connects with traditional art buyers of owning like potentially a Picasso level kind of art? Well, owning a founder's DAO token starts to look really appetizing if that game plan plays out. But then on the other hand, what if all of a sudden Meta Heroes is something that could be integrated into games or avatars? It gets really stupid disgusting what could potentially happen. Like, what happens if our good friends at Epic Games say, all right, now you can bring an avatar into our game and there's a revenue share or whatever it is. Meta Heroes become skins, and it's disgusting how much money there is to be made off of this project because there's a story and a solid brand, and it's been executed in a way where a lot of money was put up, and it could have it very well could have crashed and burned. I know a lot of people are like, well, Beanie and the people like, there's no reason that this couldn't have crashed and burned, even though it was executed very well. There's still a significant amount of risk in the project at the beginning date. But I think all it took was just seeing the announcements and where we're going for people to realize, oh shit, I should have minted more.
Well, and like I'm involved, and I wish I minted more. Like, and maybe that's some of my just confidence in the project and stuff like that. From a somewhat insider's view, like I'm not privy to a lot of these discussions that are happening. I'm working, kind of consulting on some of the back end logistics for the physicals, helping to run the Discord and stuff like that. But, there's a lot of these conversations happening well above my head. And, but even from, the information that's available publicly, like if you've been following the project closely, it's at a very high level, it's not a leap, or a big leap to think that when Beanie says he wants to, take on DC and Marvel comic books in this intellectual property, that it may not be that far off.
It is,
because like you start talking about like the NFT culture and the custom original intellectual property that they're developing, and they bring up like some heavy hitters.
Yeah,
like the announcement of being involved with the Meta Hero project, already having the like Chris Wall, Robbie Trevino, Killer Acid, Hackatow, and now Fuck Render doing alternate covers. I think if they keep this ball rolling, it's really hard to see a scenario where it doesn't play out.
Yeah,
and where they can't, like, there's so many directions that it could be taken, where it's almost like the hard part then becomes the decision in what direction to take it, right?
Yeah, I know I'm gonna lose sleep thinking about that. Like, not only like what direction do you stake or burn or that, but what direction is the company gonna go? Like, I'll lose sleep over that because I'm a shareholder.
Not to get into the unregistered securities conversation.
Right.
They've done
very, but I'm a backer and
they're invested emotionally,
right,
financially.
But I own part of the the project. I have comics. What happens when they get to the point where they're okay? Now it's time to go from comics to an animated series, from an animated series to a realistic, like, look what happened with DC and Marvel, like that progression. And obviously there's that like next layer of the onion that we're getting to in this space, which is the metaverse. What happens there? And that's just stuff that it doesn't worry me. It gets me excited, actually, like knowing the creativity of the team so far and what they want to bring out of it. So it's exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah.
Now,
well, and go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was agreeing with you. Like that's what makes me so bullish on the project. Is not only has it been like conceptually a really interesting use case and project to follow as like a case study, but it's got a really strong team that Beanie and G Funk have sort of assembled an all-star team of Solidity devs, smart contract artists, artists in and of themselves in the partnerships, and then to be able to kind of follow that down the rabbit hole a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the mind just goes crazy, right?
So the last thing that we can talk about, because I know we've been on here for a while and we've just been kind of shooting from the hip, is outside of all of this tremendous news that we've had and the fun, what do you think about some of the more controversial projects that we're seeing, which are like Gutter Cats, Super Yeti, Alien Boy, all of the alternative animal projects that we're seeing right now, the ape copies that are starting to come out. What is your take? Because I have very strong opinions on some of these. Some of them I'm very strongly in a take the bystander seat, watch what happens, see where cards fall, and then if there's an opportunity, put your money in. That's where I'm kind of standing right now. But I'm curious where you are.
So you know, in full discretion, I am not a backer of any of the projects you mentioned, but you know, as an operator, I sort of analyze these projects as learning from what they do very well, and you know, taking lessons from the stumbles and what they, you know, could have done better.
Right.
And so, you know, with the, you know, the example of Gutter Cats, you know, there was, you know, where their smart contract was left open, where they were able to mint directly from the contract before the website went live, which accelerated, you know, them move the minting window forward, so that, you know, the whole situation of like people having an unfair advantage, you know, kind of got thrown in there.
Right.
You know, their Discord was madness, you know. So when you have things like that, you know, it's loopholes that, you know, could have been avoided, potholes maybe that could have been avoided,
Right.
but it's not necessarily surprising to see at this point because of how early we are in the space, right? And you know, that's not I mean, a little bit of a slight and a fault to them, because it was avoidable, but I do think that they recovered relatively well and handled it in a lesser of two evils sort of way, as best as they could.
Right.
When you start looking at projects like, you know, Super Yetis, again, not this is not FUD or anything along those lines, but you know, maybe feedback or constructive criticism. Having a pre-sale, which, you know, you're able to mint the NFTs without the metadata going live, and then you have the issue of the meta or the you know, attributes and the properties being in the smart contract prior to it being populated on OpenSea. You know, I do see those as really interesting, you know, like cases where, is that the fault of the creators? Is it, you know, the people that had those snipes of, you know, knowing how to read Etherscan and leverage the tools at their disposal and being able to go in and snipe, you know, rarer values because they could read the smart contract and know which ones were going to be, you know, rarer before they populated?
Yeah.
Like, no, it's a really interesting discussion, but again, I think that's, you know, lessons to be learned, because that was definitely a decision that they made to go that route,
Right.
where they did not have to, you know, live mint those and then have the metadata populated after the fact. They very easily could have delayed the minting of the NFTs until everything was ready and you know, all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. But again, from an operations standpoint, I look at it as a lesson to be learned that could be applied to either, you know, your own NFT projects in the future, or as a collector, some of these sort of red flags that, you know, you could definitely be on the lookout for when you are looking at whether or not you should invest in a project. And, you know, I was talking to a couple people this morning, you know, where they were seeing, you know, like the floor prices of the Yetis dropping, you know, well below the mint price, right? And with the few of those that, you know, were available, some were, you know, gifted. I don't know if gifted, given away, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting, you know, point there, because when people were trying to flip their floor Yetis, you know, their commons, for those that got in for free, they're okay taking, you know, a 0.3, 0.4, or 0.03, 0.04 offer or list price, because that's still a gain for them.
Right.
And so
now, and I think, yeah, now you start to introduce like different market dynamics, and now what does that do to buy pressure and sell pressure? Like
that, yeah. I think there was, you know, arbitrage plays to be made there, where like, as long as the project, you know, holds strong, it'll come back close to that mint price. And there's a whole nother discussion around, you know, the promised future utility of the video game and stuff like that, whether or not, you know, that's speculative or how well that's executed being, a driver of the price. But, purely on fundamentals, like I think that there's both, an opportunity there, as well as, things just in the sharing of knowledge, things to be aware of before you either invest in a project, or if you're like, and that's where I think just having good fundamentals of having an entry plan, an exit plan, and
you need to have an exit plan. Like, you can't buy something and say, well, if it goes up, I'll pick a point to sell. You either need to know, like, hey, I'm going to hold this like 2 years, and at 2 years, whatever the price is, that's what I'm going to sell, time-based. Or it's like, okay, once it gets to like 0.4, that's where I sell. Like, I'm good. That's an exit point. I think too many people get stuck in like paralysis, and then they either hold it too long and it goes down, or they miss the right opportunity to buy. You got to have that plan. But also, just to go back a little, what you said is a learning opportunity. All of these projects where not only are the buyers and people who are looking to purchase these need to look and see what went right and went wrong, and what works, and where the opportunities were, and is that in the next project. But the people that are doing these projects need to look at other projects and see what works and what doesn't work. And I had a chat earlier today with Dream Loops, and that's essentially how they're operating the entire company, a bit Bitlectric, which is they're watching what every single other project does, seeing what works. If it works, they wait, and then if it continues to work, they're like, all right, that's something we'll do. And if they see something that doesn't work, they're like, okay, that didn't work. Here's why it didn't work. We're not going to do it. And they threw a little bit of shade at some, they didn't say exactly who, but they threw some shade, at other projects that are doing things wrong. But they gave some really good props to projects that are doing it right. Like NFT 42's projects.
Well, and shout out Jimmy Heath and NFT 42.
I'm
like
at the
those
point
guys.
where anything that they touch, it's an ape. It's an auto ape for me. It's.
Well, I mean, like when you start, like Richard and Manifold XYZ, Jimmy and Rizzle with NFT 42, like they are OGs in the space. Like when you look at kind of the bigger picture in my view, at least my perspective of it. And when it comes to really, really clever implementation of smart contracts, not only are they building their own projects that are facilitating the artists to be able to mint their own contracts, or use their own contracts to mint their own projects, but then anything that they touch is almost a vouch, right? And in my view, it's done so well. Like you look at Mad Dog Jones and the Replicator project, Pox, Ashes, and Fade projects, NFT 42's V-Friends and stuff like that. Like it's just done so well that it's hard to be there. It's almost hard to find things to be critical of.
Right.
And at what point do you just say, okay, anything they touch, I'm just going to like it? It's almost that like they've done such like great execution, and they have almost that reputation at this point of, I'll just back it because they're involved.
Right. Yeah, man.
So
I think that's a great point to end this on. We talked for like an hour. Covered
somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, a ton of great stuff. I drank some wine. I didn't talk about it, which was kind of part of the whole thing of this. But A to Z Riesling from 2020, it's good. I enjoyed it. It's not too sweet, not too dry. It's kind of in the middle. Yeah, man. I'm hopefully that we get this thing ironed out, and we'll have you back on. And I think we'll get some other people in here next Wednesday. And I'm planning the goal here. If anybody watches this far, which would be crazy, and if you do, DM me that you went this far, and I will hook you up with something. But the goal is to send the same bottle of wine to a whole bunch of people. We all get on, drink the wine, talk about it, talk about NFTs, and then whatever happens. There's not really a script to it. But all right, man.
Well, good catching up with you.
Yeah. And I'll chat with you and see you around. But enjoy the rest of your evening. And
Thank you. You as well.
yeah.